I do have to take exception to the argument that either side here is simply saying no. I guess I could look back to the times when the Republicans were in the majority. We had major energy legislation to try to move forward, and the answer from the other side was no. What we have is a debate about how we should best approach the national energy policy of our country. And we have very true and sincere and real concerns about how we should proceed on both sides. And I think it's incumbent upon us in this committee to roll up our sleeves and get down to the kinds of solutions that will work for the American people. And I believe these solutions can be found, and be found in a way that does not generate unbelievably high costs or impacts to the American people and does not drive our industry offshores. I want to share some of the concerns that were raised by Senator Alexander. In particular, as we look at the renewable energy alternatives that are discussed and the renewable energy standards that are being discussed in both the House and in the Senate, and I realize the Senate Energy Committee is the one dealing primarily with that, I'm very concerned that one of the most obvious sources of solution is largely untreated in the legislation that we expect to see coming before us, and that is nuclear power. I don't think there's much debate among any of us here on either side of the aisle that our nation is far too dependent on petroleum and carbon-based resources for our energy, and that we are far too dependent on foreign sources of that energy, and that we as a nation need to become independent, much more independent in our own development of energy. I look at it similar to how one would look at an investment portfolio. We would not, most people don't believe it's a prudent thing to invest all of their assets or all of their energy or the largest portion of them in one asset. And it's not prudent for America to have an energy policy that is so dependent on one type of energy. We need to diversify. We need to develop wind and solar and geothermal and hydro. And we need to develop the opportunity for, frankly, expanded utilization of petroleum as we transition to these other sources of energy. But we cannot ignore what is probably the biggest piece of the answer, and that is nuclear power. And I don't believe there's that much disagreement across the aisle, except that we don't seem to see the kind of provisions in proposed legislation that will truly help us expedite and move forward some of these very significant answers like nuclear power. I simply want to say that as we move forward, there are very, very obvious solutions available, and there is agreement on the issues that we must deal with regard to our national security and our national energy independence. What we have to find are ways to get past the partisan differences and reach those solutions. And I hope that this committee will seriously get down to that business. Thank you very much, Madam
Senator Crapo, thank you.
I want to come back to the question of nuclear power. There are so many other issues we do want to deal with, but the issue of nuclear power is one that I do think we need to pursue more fully. First of all, I appreciate your stand on nuclear power and your efforts to work to help us make it an integral part of our national energy policy. As I'm looking at some of the efforts to develop a renewable energy standard here, both in the Senate and in the House, one of the things that strikes me is that nuclear power is not allowed to be counted as a part of the renewable energy base in I think all of the proposals that are surfacing right now. Can you see any reason why we would not allow nuclear power to be counted in that process?
Well, it is being assisted, as already pointed out, by the fact that it is a carbon-free source of energy. There are considerable, I mean, strictly speaking, it's not a renewable energy, so it's a short answer.
Neither are a lot of the other things that are counted, but go ahead.
But it is being assisted in when you have a carbon cap and you reduce that cap, it greatly favors nuclear power. We're administering $18.5 billion loan guarantees that we hope that will bring 4 nuclear power plants up. We are looking at ways to help the Nuclear Regulatory Agency speed up using our expertise and our modeling analysis capabilities. I think we can help them speed up the approval processes. So I think, and ultimately, the rate setting commissions around the that these are local jurisdictions should look towards nuclear power as, you know, is it worth it to invest in this clean source of energy. So,
But is there any reason why we shouldn't count nuclear power in the base for those calculations?
in the base of what?
For a renewable
well,
energy standard?
It's certainly counted in the base of getting off of carbon generation.
I understand. Well, let me ask this. With regard to the loan guarantees that you mentioned, which I think are one of the key issues we should focus on in terms of strengthening nuclear power, do you have any timeline for advancing the next round of loans?
We're working very hard. I hope by the end of the summer or early fall to make announcements.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. As you know, that's very critical. And I would say that it seems to me that the question that Senator Carper asked you is one that if I had more time, I would ask you right now, and I would hope that you would provide some written answers perhaps following this hearing on this, and that is, what can this committee do in an energy bill as we're crafting one to do the best job that we can to facilitate our country's re-energizing of the nuclear energy industry? I know you don't have time in 4 seconds to answer that right now, but if you would give that some thought and give us a written reply, I would appreciate that.
I certainly would. I have a couple of requests, and they're no problem. I'll be glad to do that.
Thank you.